It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. The King is seen for the first time since his cancer diagnosis as Prince Harry flies in from LA to be by his father's side. After beginning treatment yesterday, King Charles is now one of hundreds of thousands of people in the UK facing this disease. I've been spending the afternoon speaking to other people living with cancer. We'll be hearing from them in just a moment. Also tonight, the people queuing round the block in Bristol to see a new NHS dentist as the government plans to offer dentists cash to take on new patients. The shocking reality of mental health care in prison as the Chief Inspector of Prisons warns that some people are being sent to jail simply because there's nowhere else for them to go. We'll be hearing from a former prison officer. And we'll speak to the triathlete suing his local council over a pothole after a bike accident left him in hospital for 10 days. All that to come and much more on the UK Tonight. King Charles has been seen in public today for the first time after revealing his cancer diagnosis, with Queen Camilla by his side as they headed to Sandringham. Yesterday, the King started his treatment for cancer. We still don't know what kind. It was discovered, though, during a hospital visit for an enlarged prostate. Earlier on today, Prince Harry flew in from California to be with his father. But we're told that there's no plan for the Duke of Sussex to see his brother William while he is here. Our royal correspondent Rhiannon Mills has our first report.
Less than 24 hours after his announcement, the King and Queen were briefly seen driving into Buckingham Palace, a helicopter waiting to temporarily get them away from London. Only hours earlier, Prince Harry was in one of these cars, landing back in London to see his father. The years of disagreements between the Sussexes and the rest of the royals meant a media scrum waiting at Clarence House as he was driven inside. For private time with the King, maybe a moment of reconciliation. Like any family, a cancer diagnosis will have hit them all hard.
The arrival of Harry is good news, it has to be. It didn't take long for us to be told he was coming, and it hasn't taken long for him to arrive. I think this is one of those cases where what are now minor grievances are set to one side and the big issue comes to the fore. This is a loving son who's come to see an ailing father.
The King's decision to be so open has drawn attention from around the world, even though the palace have said that there is nothing more to share, including refusing to confirm the Prime Minister's suggestion that it's been caught early.
Thankfully, this has been caught early, and now everyone will be wishing him that he gets the treatment that he needs and makes a full recovery.
Your Royal Highness, how's the King doing?
Princess Anne was too far from the cameras to know if she said anything about her brother. Her trip to Nottingham, one of 4 engagements already planned, including handing out honours at Windsor Castle. The extra attention on his family is inevitable, with doctors telling the King to leave the meeting and greeting to them.
He'll want to get up, he'll want to be moving, he'll want to be meeting people. That's where he gets his energy from. So to have this enforced sort of time away from his job, he won't be a very good patient.
Outside Buckingham Palace, the crowds had been impressed that he's been so candid.
You see these things, you kind of think they're impermeable and impervious to anything wrong going to them, and you realise they're human.
Yeah, quite shocked to hear it, but really good that he's really open about his diagnosis.
It's really brave for him to tell about this because there's lots of people out there as well who are suffering with cancer.
One thing that's been really striking since he became king is the way that people have wanted to get close to him, to shake his hand, in a way that we just didn't see with Queen Elizabeth II. So you can understand why the doctors are so cautious about him doing things like walkabouts. But that, in a way, poses its own problem for the palace, because if we don't see him out in public, how do they shut down that speculation and panic they're so keen to control? We wait to see how much they share in the coming weeks of the work that he's doing behind the scenes. A man who will only want to offer reassurance that he is still capable of carrying out his responsibilities as monarch wherever he is. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News at Buckingham Palace.
Well, it has to be remembered that the King is far from alone in his diagnosis. We know that 1 in 2 of us will develop some form of cancer in our lifetime. More than 336,000 people received treatment for cancer between December 2022 and November 2023. That's around 1,000 people per day, the highest year on record. In the UK, the four most common types of cancer are prostate cancer, breast cancer, lung cancer and bowel cancer, each with different survival rates. Well, we know that the King will be receiving the very best care, and that's a key factor here. As you can see, people from the most deprived areas simply do not live as long as those from the wealthiest, even if they have the same disease. For bladder cancer, for example, nearly 6 in 10 people from wealthy areas live another 4 years. But in the most deprived areas, it's less than half. So while the King is going through something half the population will also experience, some people will experience it in very different ways. Well, to get an idea of that experience, I visited Maggie's today, a charity that provides care and support for people going through cancer. Just last week, the Queen, who is also the charity's president, visited herself, there to offer support, as they may now hope to support her and her family. Well, this afternoon, I spoke to people at the Maggie Centre in West London, Joe, Edward and Mark. They're all living with cancer, and to Louise as well, who's a cancer support specialist at Maggie's. I started by asking Jo about her reaction to the King's diagnosis.
I was quite sort of shocked, really, but also it's nice to know that he's the same as us. He's not different. You know, even a king can get cancer. It doesn't just attack sort of us people. You know, it doesn't differentiate. It just attacks anybody. And to know that he's got it is a little bit sort of comforting.
Mark, what about you? Because we were discussing that before we sat down at the table, that the cancer is the great leveller. Anyone can get it. But what is different about the King is his global reach in terms of starting a conversation about cancer. Within the last 24 hours, it's become part of the national conversation for everyone.
My response was, here we go, which is the response I've had for the last few years regarding people I know who have subsequently, since my diagnosis, have had their diagnosis, because they talk about 1 in 2, and once you've been through the experience, you really acknowledge the fact that this is a thing, and so you hear of the next person, whether they're a celebrity, royalty, or you know whoever. And whenever I hear somebody has had their diagnosis, like, oh, okay, here we go. Now they are at the start of their
journey.
Their journey, exactly. Yes.
You three have all been through that diagnosis. I mean, Edward, to hear the diagnosis that you have cancer, what is that like?
It's not particularly pleasant, believe it or not, but you have to be pragmatic. So you just say, all right then, let's get on with this.
When you read the King's statement yesterday, he talked about being wholly positive, talking about being grateful to the medical team for finding it, because by the sounds of it, he went in to be treated for something that was benign, and while that was going on, something else was discovered. And Louise, I'm sure you can attest to that, because that is a story for so many people who perhaps don't present symptoms or present symptoms of something else. They go in thinking it's one thing, come out and it's cancer.
Absolutely, and we hear that all the time in the centre, and absolutely it's that description that you were all saying, is what a shock it is to sort of think you're going to the hospital for one thing and then to come away and find yourself in a completely different place. The amazing thing about the King sharing this is that it has brought it right out into the open and really encouraging people perhaps to talk about things, you know, whether it's that they might be worried about something and they might go and get investigated, or just perhaps they've already been diagnosed but felt they couldn't talk about it before. So it's an amazing thing that he's done.
We talk about this cancer journey and nobody's is the same. But what was yours like, Edward? Because, you know, King Charles has just started this. He started treatment yesterday. So what was your journey like?
Oh, it was very mixed. I would say a little bit of anger, but not very much. A little bit of acceptance, but also not very much. And a bewilderment. It was all those wrapped into one. And the hardest thing is that you had to learn to be a diplomat, because you had to treat the news with other people, the nearest and dearest, and that was very tricky. So I wish King Charles and Prince Harry have a good rapport over this. Let's hope so.
Mark, you were diagnosed with bowel cancer.
Yes.
What's it like in those early days of that diagnosis?
My diagnosis experience was a little unusual in that the real drama for me was before my diagnosis, because I was rushed into emergency surgery. I had to have surgery, which has resulted in now I have I like to call it the souvenir of living with a stoma. So that part of it was quite dramatic. It was touch and go. Had it been 1 week later, I wouldn't be sat here. And I was in hospital for 3 weeks in recuperation with other complications as a result of the surgery. And it was halfway through week 3 that my surgeon sat me down and confirmed, yes, this was definitely a very nasty, fast, aggressive cancer. So in a weird way, having the previous experience, maybe that served as a bit of it kind of had me receive the cancer news a little easier. I heard the word cancer before, but it was speculation at the time. And I live by the philosophy of don't worry about anything until it shows up at your front door. So when I heard the word cancer, it was like, right, okay. And my response was, okay, this is where we are. What do we do about it?
Well, nobody's diagnosis is the same. The way people receive the news isn't the same, and what happens next isn't the same for everyone. You know, cancer, it's a big encompassing term for something that's so individual. Jo, what was your story? Because you were diagnosed with breast cancer.
I was diagnosed with breast cancer through a routine mammogram. Went for my mammogram, got a letter a couple of weeks later asking me to go back. They needed to do some further tests. So I went back, I had more mammograms done, they took an ultrasound scan. There was just a little area that was different, but they couldn't decide if it was cancer or not. So they took biopsies, and then I went back and they said, yes, it is cancer. But they said it's been caught very early. It was small, but the size of a pea. And it was curable and treatable and curable. So everything I wanted to hear, but it was still such a shock. And also the surgeon and the consultant who informed me said that she wanted to commend me for going for my scan, because so many women and young girls don't bother to go.
Yeah. Too busy.
Well, that's it.
Something else.
Exactly.
I don't want to bother anyone.
Yeah.
It won't happen to me.
I'll go next time or something. Yeah. So that's why it's so important to go, because I examined myself a couple of times a month and felt nothing. And I told her this, and she said you wouldn't have done because it was so small and it was quite deep. When you hear the C word, you know, and a lot of the times you think, oh, am I going to die? You know, that fear is always there. But you know, luckily we're all okay. But yeah, I mean, it is a shock. But I think really staying positive, and I hope the King stays positive through his treatment, however bad it gets, because I really do think it does help and aid your recovery.
Yeah. Mark and Edward, it's important for people to know that it's okay not to be okay as well.
Definitely.
There's only...
Well, no, absolutely, and I don't believe being totally positive. I mean, anyone can say totally positive, but what does it really mean? You hope to be positive, but there will be times of deep negativity, and you have to try and force yourself almost to be positive sometimes. You have to work at it.
Mark, is that the same for you?
if I'm honest, it's been, I mean, of course I can only speak from my personal experience. For me, it's been a little different in that I've never felt that I've had to work at being positive. I wouldn't go so far as to say you feel impervious, but I feel that I'm able to cope with things a little better. I stress about things far less. It gives you it gives one a real sense of perspective. So it's a funny thing. It's a terrible thing to receive. It's a terrible thing to go through. But on the flip side, it's given me a couple of gifts that I walk along now, and I feel that I mean, this is the best I've felt in years as a result of the treatment and everything. And I'm just taking each moment, literally each moment. I don't talk about day by day. No day is guaranteed. So I'm enjoying this very moment right now.
I know that the Queen, Camilla, is heavily involved with Maggie's, and the King is a patron of a number of cancer charities as well. They know only too well about cancer, about the statistics, about the science, about the treatment, about the care. You know, they've given so much in that area, and now they will be the recipient of it. And all three here have spoken about the importance of telling family and having family around them. It doesn't matter whether you're the royal family or, you know, our families. We're all in the same situation together.
Absolutely. I think it's almost as if sort of you can visualise a sort of stone sort of falling into some water, and you can sort of see that rippling out around it, and it absolutely does affect so many people around you, and we see that in the centre. You know, we have well over 100 people coming through the door every day, and how it affects people sort of individually, and it will sometimes be that person with the diagnosis, but sometimes it will be that family member, that friend who are also looking for that support with how it's making them feel and how they're going to manage things.
And the King's in a particularly unique situation in terms of he's the head of state, he's the head of the royal family, he's having to go through all this so publicly. What do you think it's done by him being so open at this stage? It is still a very early stage, you know, he's only just started treatment, but just by coming out, he's the first monarch to do so that we know of. I'm sure there has been a history of illness and disease in the royal family, but it's never been spoken about openly.
And I think absolutely it has opened that door to allow other people perhaps then to start speaking openly about this and to share their story, their experience.
It's important that if people are worried, they should get something checked out. I mean, when we talk about 1 in 2 of us getting cancer, we're all living longer, and it is that the older generation who are more likely to get cancer, even if you are fit and healthy. What would you say to people if they have a niggle? Because often cancer symptoms can be dismissed as something else, because cancer symptoms can feel like a cold. You might just be tired, aches and pains of getting older. So people are reluctant.
Yeah, absolutely. But I would really encourage anybody that is feeling sort of that something doesn't feel quite right for them, they're worried about something, to reach out to their GP to go and get themselves checked out. It won't be the case that it will be a cancer diagnosis. So for some it will be that reassurance. For some it may be something else that's benign, but still may need treating. And then obviously we know that for some people it will end up being that diagnosis. Yeah. But the earlier that it's picked up, the better.
Yeah. And there are people there for you, medical and of course in the support communities with Maggie's and other charities. I want to end with my practical and positive people with some words of wisdom, because I think, you know, you've been through this, you've lived it, your families have lived it. And it's not just advice for the King, but it's advice for anyone watching this who has just got their diagnosis, is just about to start treatment, is thinking about their mum or dad who's about to go through it and doesn't know how to support them. What advice would you give them? I'll start with you, Jo.
Well, to try and stay positive, to tell your family as soon as you get your diagnosis, because you will need their love, their support, and that means a lot. And that does help you get through it. And if there's a wonderful place like Maggie's, go to it, because you'll have all the help and support there as well, as and when you need it.
I would say, well, I would agree. My advice would be, you may not feel to want to tell people, but I would recommend you do it, because much better to have people there for you than to be dealing with it on your own.
Yeah.
I can't say that I was absolutely open with absolutely everyone, but in the end I'm coming round to my colleagues here point of view that it is better to talk and better to be as expansive as you can. But information to your friends and your family is quite tricky to handle. It's not the easiest thing in the world, and you need to think that you are a diplomat. You have to put your diplomat hat on and try the best way you can, even with the diagnosis, to treat all the other people around you with respect and tender-heartedness and kindness.
I think that's sound advice for the King and anyone who is going through this right now. I want to thank you so much for your positivity today. It's been a really uplifting discussion about cancer and what it means to different people, and I know that you're all coming out the other side of it at the moment with positive results, so I wish you the very best. Thank you so much for talking to us. I really appreciate it. Louise and the wonderful team at Maggie's, thank you for hosting us. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, what a wonderful group of people talking to me at Maggie's Centre earlier today. A massive thank you to Edward, Mark, Joe, and of course Louise from Maggie's, and practical positivity from all of them. Still to come on the UK Tonight. The UK's dental crisis. People in Bristol queuing around the block to get an NHS appointment. But how have things got this bad? Plus, a new report highlights the scale of self-harm mental ill health in the UK's prisons is causing. We'll be hearing from a former prison officer.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place for news.
I'm Martin Brunt and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
I'm Helen Ann Smith. I'm Sky's Asia correspondent and I'm based here in Beijing.
We help you understand the world with us. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway. Try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, welcome back. You're watching the UK Tonight. Now, a leaked email that's been sent to some MPs has revealed the government's plans to try and tackle a growing crisis in NHS dentistry, including an offer of cash to dentists to take on new patients. Well, let's give you an idea of the scale of the problem. These are pictures from Bristol today. Hundreds of people queuing around the block and then some, desperate to try and sign up to this new surgery and secure an appointment, an NHS appointment. Well, Sky's Molly Malone is here with more details on this. Molly, that's an extreme example of what's going on with NHS dentistry in the UK. Explain to us how Bristol found itself in that situation, because there are varying degrees of what we saw there around the UK.
Yeah, so what happened in this specific example was there was a Bupa, a private dentistry practice, that shut down, and then loads of people, hundreds of people queuing for hours on those streets of Bristol to access NHS dental appointments, many of them with little luck, queuing for hours. Now, as you said, that's an extreme example, but this is a problem that's really been building for many years now, and it's about access to NHS dental treatment, but also demand, the sheer number of people needing those NHS appointments and not being able to get them. Now, the government have got this plan. As you say, it was leaked. It was meant to come out tomorrow, but a number of MPs got wind of it. But actually, the proposals very much stand, and they include, as you say, a cash bonus payment of between £15 and £50 for NHS dentists to take on new cases, to try and incentivise to take on new patients. Also, they're calling golden hello payments. Again, another incentive payment for up to 240 dentists who'll be offered up to £20,000 to encourage dentists to work in remote areas. It's that access problem. So many people are having to drive for miles to get to these practices. And another one, which seems to be generally welcomed, which is mobile dental teams going into schools to actually varnish and polish and raise awareness, really, about, tooth decay in young children from early on. Now, it's those proposals that so far have been largely welcome, but actually it's the bonus payments, even though they sound enticing. The British Dental Association are actually saying it's complicated, but they have a contract with the NHS. The money awarded in that contract won't necessarily change, they say, but actually the way it's divvied up will change. So they say actually the contract remains the same, but you have to award part of that contract to new patients rather than old patients. So already some cracks emerging, but the government say this is £200 million and a plan that they really are trying to tackle the problem.
Yeah, well, given those scenes in Bristol, it's just a real extreme visual representation of what's going on in the UK at the moment when it comes to access to NHS dental care. We'll pick this up again, but for the moment, Molly, thank you. We'll follow that story here on the UK Tonight. Much more to talk about when it comes to dentistry. Right, next tonight, a new report that's been seen exclusively by Sky News has revealed the scale of self-harm and mental illness in prisons. The government's target to transfer prisoners who are acutely unwell into psychiatric care is 28 days. But some inmates say that they've waited almost a year to be transferred. It means prisoners with illnesses such as psychosis and schizophrenia are often being left in solitary confinement while their condition deteriorates. A warning that this report coming up from our correspondent Alice Porter contains description of self-harm.
Bryony was just a normal university student, but she developed mental health problems, and in 2017 she was arrested for malicious communication and attempted arson. She had undiagnosed bipolar disorder. Bryony, not her real name, went to prison.
When you're psychotic and depressed, being locked away in a cell is one of the worst things you can do to someone. I started to self-harm because we were allowed razors in our cell. It was basically a way to cope with my surroundings. It was the worst experience of my life.
Self-harm in women's prisons is at record levels. Now a new report reveals the extent that acutely unwell prisoners, both male and female, will go to hurt themselves. In a report exclusively seen by Sky News, His Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons says some mentally unwell prisoners are so driven to harming themselves they have removed teeth or maimed themselves to the point of exposing their own intestines, frequently causing life-changing injuries. But prisoners are waiting long periods before they reach hospital. NHS guidelines stipulate mentally unwell prisoners should be transferred within 28 days from that need being identified. But 85% of prisoners are not transferred within that deadline. The average wait was 85 days, with one person waiting over a year.
What we come across is cases where prisoners used in effect as a place of safety. So out in the community there is no provision in place for someone who's very unwell, and therefore sometimes magistrates or judges will send them to prison simply because there's nowhere else for them to go.
Sarah Reid had schizophrenia and was in prison solely for psychiatric reports to be obtained to confirm whether she was fit to stand trial. Her mother says Sarah was kept in isolation, unmedicated. In January 2016, she was found dead.
She'd be looking around and waving in and out and saying, "Mum, I need my meds, I can't sleep." She also had these two black eyes that were, when I saw her, I found it shocking. She just looked to me like she was suffering. "Please, please get me out of here, Mum." That was the last thing she said to me.
The government says providers in prison have clear processes in place to identify, assess and treat offenders with mental health needs, and NHS England is investing in post-custody care. After 6 months in prison, Bryony was sent to a psychiatric hospital where she finally got a diagnosis of bipolar disorder.
I don't know if getting arrested and getting sent to prison was the right response. It might have been more beneficial if I'd have been taken straight to hospital, and prison just made illness 10 times worse.
Bryony is now back studying at university, but for many of those who remain locked away, it's still a long wait to get the help they need. Alice Porter, Sky News.
Well, if you or anyone you know has been affected by the issues in Alice's report there, you can call the Samaritans. 116123 is the phone number, or you can email joe@samaritans.org. Well, joining me now in the studio, Alex South, herself a former prison officer and author of Behind These Doors, a book that documents her decade as a prison officer. Alex, good to see you. Thank you for coming in to talk to us. Really shocking and hard-hitting, Alice's report, to us, but sadly not to you. This is something you recognise from your time working in prisons.
Unfortunately, so many of that is really familiar to me. The scenarios are familiar, the environments are familiar. And I think that's important to recognise that these aren't isolated incidents. These are things that happen every day in prison. You have the experience that Bryony talks about. So many people watching this who have some experience, whether of prison as a member of staff or someone who's been held there themselves, that will really resonate. And I think it's important to make that clear, that these aren't sort of far-off abstract concepts. This happens every day in prison, and these conditions that we hold people in are as poor as they sound, and it's unsurprising that people's mental health worsens.
And when we talk about people with deteriorating mental health, we're talking about psychosis, we're talking about schizophrenia, conditions that need specialist help and care. How are these people ending up in prison?
It's obviously there's so many sort of different pathways to someone ends up in prison and starts to suffer from these conditions. But particularly in terms of that report, what the inspectorate is referring to is that these are individuals who have been held to prison. It's sort of colloquially called remand for your own protection. So you haven't necessarily been convicted of a crime. You're not necessarily even awaiting judgment for a crime. That specific report, and Bryony's case as well, is referring to somebody who is deemed a risk to themselves. So they're remanded in prison because there's no space in the local community, which would be a hospital, some kind of mental health provision. So the only space that they can be held in is prison. And ideally, that would be a really short-term measure, because prison is absolutely not conducive to positive mental health as it is, never mind if people are suffering.
But they become stuck in that system because, again, you can't just magic up the places for them to go. If they're not there in the first place, you know, a couple of months in prison, you're not just going to find that space.
Yeah,
so they're stuck in the system.
That's exactly the issue. I mean, in that report, they note how 28 days is the time period a person should stay in prison once they've been noted that they need to go to a mental health hospital. I never knew of a prisoner suffering from that degree of illness who was transferred in 28 days, not once. And I was in the job for 10 years. I mean, that just doesn't happen. 28 days doesn't happen. It's far more likely to be weeks, months, and as you said yourself, possibly even a year.
How do you deal with it? Because, Alex, do you get any kind of specialist training in how to deal with somebody with schizophrenia or paranoid psychosis?
I mean, when I joined the job, obviously it was a long time ago. It was over a decade ago now that I joined. I mean, back then, mental health training was very minimal. I'm of the understanding that that hasn't really changed much. And so it's a difficult one. I think you kind of go and trying to use your interpersonal skills, using the things you've learned. But ultimately, these aren't people you should be dealing with in prison. These people who quite clearly need to be in a mental health setting, a proper hospital where they can receive treatment. And if someone's being detained under the Mental Health Act in prison, you can't legally treat them. They can only be treated once they're in an actual hospital. So again, their condition just deteriorates. And then staff are in a really challenging position in how to navigate that, which in turn has an impact on the mental health of staff as well.
And Alex, just a final question. I mean, we talk about the prison system, the broken prison system here in the UK tonight a lot. We've done investigative reports on it and uncovered shocking stories like that. Why did you want to be a prison officer?
Well, when I joined, things were very different. You know, the changes in 10 years are significant and they're really tragic, in my opinion, and I feel very sad thinking about them.
Yeah.
But I joined as a volunteer, so I started volunteering with young offenders. I loved it. The prison officers that I worked with were remarkable, and they gave me a real clear sense of how effective you can be in that role, of how rewarding it can be. And that isn't idealistic, you know, it isn't naive. I went there because I wanted to do good, and I think I did do good.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the position we're in now, you can have the best intentions in the world. If there's no infrastructure, if there's little to no support, if we're at 99% capacity, which we are in prisons, I think kind of speaks for itself.
And good people like you walk away. Oh, Alex, thank you so much. Alex South, their former prison officer and author of Behind These Doors, which documents her experience a decade within the prison system as a prison officer. Thank you.
Thank you.
As to come on the UK tonight, we're going to speak to a triathlete who's suing his local council. This is after he ended up like this. He'll tell us about the pothole that left him seriously injured, and it still hasn't been filled in, more than a year later. Now, they're motorists' #1 enemy. I am talking about potholes. It's thought there could be as many as 2 million of them scattered across the UK's roads. The RAC say pothole incidents equate to around 80 call-outs a day in the UK. But more than a costly inconvenience, they can also be extremely dangerous, as my next guest will tell us. Paul Hughes, a triathlete from Kidderminster, is suing Staffordshire County Council after finding out the very pothole that caused him to fall off his bike and put him in hospital is yet to be filled in, 15 months on. Paul spoke to me for the UK Tonight, and I started by asking him what happened that day.
All I can really remember is the just slightly going downhill. A couple of cyclists coming the other way, just gone past me, and felt the first thump, of a hole. And after that, I blacked out. And it wasn't until I actually came around and lay on the floor with luckily the cyclists had turned around and come back, and they were helping me. That's all I can remember about the actual crash.
You tried to get up and you realised there was a problem, and once you got to hospital, you realised how bad your situation was. Talk us through what had happened.
When I'd come round, and first instinct is to try and get up, isn't it? And I realised I couldn't move my legs, so I was thinking, this is not good. And then, as far as the other breaks, and the pain didn't really kick in until a bit later on. I suppose your adrenaline's going.
Obviously, you're in hospital for a long time. When you're finally able to process what happened, what did you do? What course of action can you take? Did you get in touch with the local council, which was Staffordshire County Council? Those were the roads you were cycling on.
I went online and found their incident page, filled all that in, sent the photos, and they acknowledged me with one of those automated replies, and that's it. And they haven't done anything since. And then recently we went back 15 months later to the same spot, and nothing's been done.
The potholes is still there.
It makes you very angry.
You had a fractured spinal cord, a damaged lung, a broken collarbone, broken ribs and a broken pelvis. Have Staffordshire County Council got in touch with you at all?
No, nothing. I did send them the email with the list of all the injuries and everything else, but I've heard nothing back.
How does that make you feel, Paul? Because obviously the injuries at the time, painful enough and awful to recover from, but you're still living with the after effects of it now. It's affected your ability to ride and be active, and it's affected your work as well.
I'm a landscape gardener, and it's affected me big time. It affects everything. I pretty much lost my job over it, and it's depressing, and you just don't know what to do. I mean, you're trying to get motivation to go biking again. It's very hard. I'm getting there. But to actually go out and enjoy a bike ride, that would be nice, instead of coming back thinking, I survived a bike ride.
And we have had a response from Staffordshire County Council, their Cabinet Member for Highways and Transport, saying this: we're sorry to hear of this and the injuries sustained, but we can't comment on the specifics of an individual incident. We have one of the largest road networks in the country, 6,000 kilometres, and keeping our highways in a good state of repair means an ongoing and costly challenge. Last year, we completed around 16,000 pothole jobs around the county, which often consist of 2 or 3 potholes. The recent wet weather has seen a rise in new pothole reports, and our crews will be carrying out numerous temporary and permanent repairs to the roads. All reported issues are inspected as soon as possible and assessed for their severity, and we deal with any defect that poses an immediate risk as a priority. How does it make you feel hearing that, Paul? Because given what happened to you for that particular pothole, you find it hard to believe that that isn't being treated as a priority, if it's a route used by many cyclists like yourself.
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's crazy. And I understand, there is a lot of potholes, and it's not, they haven't got a bottomless pit of money, but the roads just seem to be getting worse and worse, and, I just think it needs to be sorted out. People want to go out and enjoy cycling, and it's a big thing.
Well, Paul, I know you're taking legal action after finding that pothole, since what happened to you 15 months on, hadn't been dealt with. And just a final question to you. What do you want to say to people at home? Because we've all had a tangle with a pothole. We've all taken money out of our own pockets to repair cars, replace tyres. Yours is an extreme example, but lives can be lost through unrepaired roads. What would you say to people watching? What do you want them to take from you speaking out today?
I just think everybody just needs to get on and report.
Well, a remarkably calm Paul, given what happened to him. Let's speak to someone now who knows a thing or two about potholes and what can be done legally to deal with them. Joining us, consumer champion Helen Dewdney, who runs The Complaining Cow. First of all, your reaction to Paul's story. I know you were listening and the look on your face pretty much said it all, but viewers couldn't see that. Tell me what you think.
Well, I mean, it's really shocking, isn't it? Because the councils are responsible. Yes, they are underfunded for road maintenance. That's a given. But they are still legally responsible, and they have got to deal with matters when they've been reported. And clearly, Paul reported that pothole. So to find that it's still not filled in is amazing, really. Because if there are any more accidents on that will help people with their evidence for their claim.
Yeah, Helen, Paul's is an extreme example. We know potholes can be dangerous. They can cause injury, accidents that can lead to fatalities. But most of us, if we're lucky, will just get a flat tyre or damage to a car, and that's expensive. What do you do when that happens? Because most people just call the RAC or the AA, replace it at their own cost and move on. But what can you actually do?
Well, it's really important to get your evidence. So take your photos, take your videos, date it. And also, if you can, try and put a measurement against the pothole, even if that means you're going back. So you're actually showing how deep it is and how big it is, because that's going to help your case. You can also look to see if that has been reported, because if a pothole has been reported and the council haven't done anything about maintaining that, then that will help with your evidence. You can also try a freedom of information request, and that for the information about how many of their potholes have been reported. You can report it on the National Street Gazetteer on Find My Street, and that will tell you which local authority is responsible for that pothole in that area.
Helen, you've got to forgive me for not sharing your optimism, because I myself, like many watching, will have been through this process, and Paul outlined it perfectly when I interviewed him. You send an email, you get an automated response, and many people I know have got a response saying, we are aware of it. That's it. You try to call the council or the highways agency, you can't get through to an actual person, you just get automated messages. Any tips on trying to break through that if you do want to pursue it? Because most people, quite frankly, just give up.
Yeah, and that's what they hope. That's what they hope. Like any company, they hope that you will give up with your complaint. Don't, persevere. But also keep everything in writing, because you want that evidence. In case you have got to go to court, as we're seeing many cases having to do, Paul's having to do that, you're going to need that evidence in writing. If you're not getting a reply, you can go to the CEO of the council. So you can get their name and email address from ceoemail.com. And you can write to the CEO and say that you are going to take this matter to court if you do not receive a satisfactory response, and saying that this is what I'm claiming for, this is what it's cost, this is the damage to my car, these are my medical records, if there's anything that's happened medically, and say that you will go to court. You can go to money claim online and actually fill everything out as if you were going to court. Just before you do the submit button where you have to pay, take a screenshot and send that, because that will show that you mean business, where you add up all your costs, the court fee, any out-of-pocket expenses, and show that, just to show that you mean business, and then they might realise that you're going to have to take priority.
Helen, really appreciate your time. Helen Dewdney, who runs The Complaining Cow, with a bit of practical advice there on what to do if you tangle with a pothole. It can be expensive. It can also be, as we found out, very painful. Coming up on the UK Tonight, we're going to bring you a handy lesson in why you shouldn't always follow your sat-nav. And in the sport, we're going to look at why Mauricio Pochettino thinks his job is safe at Chelsea. Check this out.
Welcome to Sky Television. February 5th, 1989, the dawn of television's new age. And the most dramatic innovation in broadcasting since the launch of commercial television in Britain more than 3 decades ago.
Intergalactic.
It was great. It's like Star Wars. What do you think, Wilf?
As someone, I watch quite a lot of old TV footage, and this takes a biscuit and really stands out. And I have to say, happy birthday to everyone at Sky, obviously, but in particular, those that were there from the start, Kay, you in particular, of course, and the commitment and dedication that takes is quite impressive. So happy birthday, Kay.
It wasn't just me, Alex Crawford as well, Martin Brunt too. Now I'm listing people and I'm going to get in trouble because I'm going to miss some people out and that won't be very good at all. But who remembers where they were when this happened in 1997?
Diana, Princess of Wales, has in fact been killed in that car accident in Paris just a few hours ago. There had been extreme concern that Diana was very seriously injured when she was taken from the wreckage. There was a news blackout, to all intents and purposes, for a significant amount of time. Confirmation from the Interior Minister from Paris for a short time. And now there is confirmation that Diana, Princess of Wales, has died.
My producer was in my ear at the time and he said, just take a deep breath, look down and read what is on the wire service in front of you. I knew her a little bit because we used to go to the gym together. Right. So, yeah, it was quite the shock. This is 7/7, which was the bomb. London bombings. Do you remember on the London Underground? It was actually the day after the Olympics. So London, their celebrations for winning the 2012 Olympics was cut short after we saw 4 separate bombs.
I of course remember that, and I remember being at home when that story unravelled, and probably was watching Sky News as it happened, knowing that my brother was on the tube and you're desperately trying to find out where they are.
Coming up shortly, a bit of a public service announcement. Why you shouldn't blindly put your faith into sat-nav. But first, Teddy is here with the sport, and we're going to talk about problems at Chelsea. But the manager is confident his job is safe because he's had something in writing. Well, it's by text, so legally I don't know how safe that is.
I don't know if it's a legal guarantee of his continued employment for Mauricio Pochettino, but certainly he was in bullish mood ahead of their FA Cup replay at Aston Villa tomorrow night. The Chelsea manager coming off the back of a pretty harrowing weekend, conceded 4 goals for the second game in a row. They lost 9 and 23 at the end of that match against Wolves. Boos were ringing out around Stamford Bridge as the club dropped to 11th in the table, the bottom half, after a 12th place finish last season, which was the lowest. He wasn't there for that, but the malaise has continued. And you wonder, with the text message from the owners, perhaps it's acknowledgement that their scheme of buying all these young players, youngest squad in the league, perhaps hasn't been that good. They're on 8-year contracts, but perhaps not ready. And then maybe that's a bit of a saving grace for Pochettino. He's also got a lot of fans in the media as well because of his charisma. Had that swashbuckling young team at Tottenham as well that people enjoyed. Didn't win a trophy there, won a couple of trophies in Paris, but perhaps now with the League Cup final coming up, they will at least hold off until that against Liverpool and see where he stands.
Did he say what was in the text message? Because it might have just been a thumbs up, which really doesn't,
just positive, he said. Yeah, he said, we're all together, and that's important, he says after that. So it's, yeah.
Did he have anything to say about a player's wife apparently calling for him to be sent?
Well, one of his leaders on the pitch, 39-year-old Thiago Silva, his wife, usually puts positive messages on X towards the end of the game against Wolves. Put it's time to change. If you wait any longer, it will be too late. Thiago Silva, apparently, Pochettino's revealed, has gone into his office and they've got a very good relationship as well, and that's all been sorted out. But yeah, difficult times for Chelsea. We'll see how they get on tomorrow night at Villa. Meanwhile, big game in the Scottish Premiership to tell you about in just a second.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
'23 saw Rebecca Welsh become the first female Premier League referee and Sam Allison become the second ever black referee in the league. They both came from PGMOL's Referee Development Group, dedicated to pushing talented officials into reaching the highest level of the game. The next crop of referees are hoping to break through to the big time, including former Stevenage player Farai Halam.
It's amazing to see Sam and Rebecca to go and do something which hasn't been done for a while, or in Becky's case has never been done before. I grew up on a council estate in East London, I didn't know anyone that refereed. I played 4 years full-time football, kind of leaving school, which was like my childhood dream. Came to an end, as all kind of careers do at some point. I kind of stumbled into refereeing. Didn't think it would lead to anything, and yeah, 8 years on, to be officiating in the professional game, to be a PGMOL official is just like mind-blowing. It's fantastic. It's given me like a new lease of life. Historically, there's maybe been a bit of a stigma around refereeing of, oh, I'm not sure it's for me, I wouldn't do that. I think we're seeing refereeing changing, like massively for the better. People forget that referees are football fans themselves. Like, we all love the game.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Right, let's have a check on the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The rest of the week colder than recently, with some wintry hazards, especially on Thursday. Before then, much of the south will be mild, wet and windy this evening, while the north looks drier and colder. The wind and rain will largely clear across southern Britain overnight, leaving most places dry with a widespread frost. There'll be a scattering of showers in the north, especially for northern and western Scotland. Icy stretches likely there. Southern England, rather cloudy tomorrow morning, with showers affecting the southwest. Elsewhere, mainly dry with some hazy sunshine.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Something weird and wonderful to leave you with tonight. It's a bit of a cautionary tale, actually. Don't always trust your sat-nav, or you might end up like this van. Plans have been made to install temporary barriers on this street in Edinburgh because sat-navs continue to send motorists down what appears to be a very small road, but it is, in fact, a set of stairs. Let that be a valuable lesson to you. Well, that's all from the UK Tonight. Don't forget, you can catch up on all the highlights on our webpage. Just scan the QR code on your screen and you can share your thoughts with us there as well. Coming up next at 9 o'clock, it is The World with Yalda Hakeem. We'll see you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock.